Hello and welcome to 10 Ways to Get Creative with Lightning Components. I'm certainly glad to be here with you today and share some of this creative content with you. Also want to thank all of our sponsors for making this possible. We certainly appreciate their support. I'm going to start with a little bit of information about myself. My name is Eric Smith. I've been in the technology field for over 40 years. I founded my own IT firm, ran that for a couple dozen years, grew it to almost 100 people. And after that, I worked as a sales rep in the technology field for about a dozen years. I have been the director of software development for a internet service provider, and I'm currently working as a technical architect for a Salesforce Platinum Partner Gears CRM. Really enjoy that, love working with the Salesforce environment, and I love sharing some of the things that have helped me and making things better for our clients. All of the components that I'm going to talk about today, they're all free. They can all be customized. There's no coding required. And you can really set these up to kind of do things the way you want to have them work. They're all available on unofficialsf.com. They can be downloaded from there. All the instructions are there, and all of the links will be part of this presentation. And I'm going to go through 10 of these and show you how they can be used. I'm going to start initially with a very simple component. It's called horizontal rule, and it does the amazing thing of drawing a line. You would think, well, why would I want to draw a line? Well, when you're displaying something on a screen, whether it's a record page or in a flow screen, there are times where you want to be able to differentiate different sections on the screen. This is a flow that's running in a tab on a record page. It has a few different components here. And what we see down here with these three buttons is this update button is really related to this text box here. And these other two buttons, reset and loss, are kind of related to the entire tab. And it's really hard to see that visually if we're just looking at it like we see it on the screen. Now, if I could do something as simple as just putting a line in there, it separates that information on the screen. And I think it makes it more readable and more understandable for the user. Let's take a look at a slightly more complex example. Here on this screen, I've got a lot of information, and this is 4 different tables displaying different information from different objects. They're kind of all jumbled together. Now, if we could separate those with a line, you can now see that that information becomes much more presentable, easier for the user to differentiate what means what on that screen. So we're taking something very simple, like drawing a line, and actually using that to present a screen that's going to be much more usable. Okay, let's move on to another component. And for those of you who have been working with Lightning for a while, you probably realize that screen real estate is very important. There's only so much information you can display on one screen at a time without having to have the user scroll up and down. So this is a component I created to put on a Lightning page to display a large text area field, but it also gives the user a little bit of control over what they want to see and how they want to see it and when they want to see it. So here on this screen, I have a couple large text area fields, but you've noticed I've included let me go back here. On this screen, you notice that I've included a toggle button with each of these. And that toggle button gives the user the ability to turn that information, turn that display on and off. So if they need to free up some screen real estate, they want to see more information without scrolling up and down, they have the ability to do that. It's under their control. You've also noticed that they have the ability to change the size of the text box that's being displayed, and they can drag that larger and smaller. This component also can be configured to support view mode or edit mode. You notice on one of these text areas, there's an update button. So that's in edit mode. The user can make changes, click the update button, and update that field. So this can be used on any Lightning record page, and anytime that you want to display a lot of information in a field, but give the user the ability to control when and how they're working with that information. one of the things you noticed on that component was that toggle button. Well, I have another component I created, and I call it the toggle field button. And all it is that toggle button, but what it gives me the ability to do, or gives you the ability to do, is you can set that toggle button to change the value of a field in your record. So I have a sample here on a case where if the technician that's handling the case wants to escalate the case, they can click that button and escalate the case by changing the value of that field. So they don't have to edit, change the value, save to do it. They can just click that button to do it. Now, the interesting thing about being able to do it this way is you also have the ability, because the value of the field is being changed, you can trigger a process builder, or you can trigger a record triggered flow based on the change of the value of that field. So in this particular case, when the technician escalates a case, it not only changes the value of that field, it runs a process builder that sends a notification out. So we're actually running a process builder by clicking a button and giving the user the ability to do that themselves while they're interacting with the page. Another interesting use for being able to change the value of a field is we can also use that in visibility rules. So in this demonstration here, I just have a couple toggle buttons that change the value of a field behind the scenes that I use in a visibility rule to be able to turn a component on and off on the display. So I have a red component and a blue component. And when the user clicks the toggle, it changes the visibility rule for the component, and they can turn them on and off under their own control on that screen. Showing you how that works, this is basically being done with a visibility rule on the component when you're in the Lightning App Builder setting up your page. And this is just an example here of what the component is. It's very simple. It's just displaying some text, but by having that component visibility, that's what ends up controlling when it's displayed and when it's not displayed on the screen. Now I'm going to get into some components that have a little more meat to them, a little more complex. And the first one I want to start with is a visual pick list. This is something you can use on flow screens, that you can display pick list values, but not just the value itself in the text, but you can include images with those as well, just to make a screen a little more interesting. Again, this is a case where the technician can select an option to say what kind of mood the client is in when they're dealing with them. Are they happy? Are they angry? Is it neutral? And rather than just seeing the text and selecting those values from a pick list, this is set up to just display an image. So the user can go in and select one of those images, and it'll actually change that pick list value. We see over here the value is changed on the screen. So this component can also be configured a few different ways. Right here, we're looking at a small image with some text next to it. We can even set it up to display just an image. In this example here, I got a larger image, and they're selecting just the image to switch back and forth. So there's different ways you can set this component up and use it. Now, stepping away from the visualization, let's get into a component that can be used to control how the user is interacting with the flow and what you end up navigating to when you're finishing doing some processing. Oftentimes in a flow, if you make some changes, you want the screen to update. You want that to represent the changed values. Or in some cases, you may have a flow that runs that creates a brand new record, and you want to then have the user go to that record so they can view the record or they can edit the record. And this component here allows you to, at the end of your flow, put this action in there to say, I want you to go to the record that has this ID, and you can do it either in view mode or edit mode, which then allows the user to either see it or interact with it. In this example, I'm adding a product or an asset to a case. Once it's added, if I click view, it goes to a new tab, and they're now looking at that new record. You can also do the same thing, but do it in edit mode. So you're taking them to that new record, but you're putting it in edit mode so they can continue to make changes or do other things with that record before they move on. This component is very powerful, and you can not just go to records. You can do things like go to special screens. You can go to list views. You can go to web URLs, and any number of different things you can use to redirect where the user is interacting with Salesforce or with other things in their environment. Another powerful component is the quick choice component. This one it's been very popular. It's been expanded quite a bit. It's also, once it was published on unofficial SF, it also went on and became part of the Trailblazer templates. There's automation component templates that are part of Trailhead that you can access as well. And this component is now part of that. Some of the nice things about this particular component is, unlike the standard pick list component in a flow, this one supports record types. And if you can specify what record type you want, and you will only see the pick list values for that particular record type. This is very useful. So as we can see here, when if we specify a record type, in this case it's an opportunity residential record type, we have a certain list of options that are available. We can look at the exact same field if we're looking at a commercial record type, and you notice that we have a whole different set of options that are available to us. We can do other things with this component. We can set it to be required if we want. We also have the ability to display the pick list as radio buttons if we want to. We can do checkboxes, and this is something very interesting that I added to this component, is we can display what's called a visual card. And so we can have a header information, we can have detail information with that, and use that as a pick list. We can include images, we can make it single column, we can make it 2 columns. We can also make it responsive to the size of the screen, or responsive to running on a mobile device. So it's a very powerful component. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it for pick lists, radio buttons, record types, displaying visual cards. It's a really powerful addition you can put in your flows to give you different ways to interact with your users. And I'd really recommend you take a look at some of the things we can do with that component. Now, another one, this one I'm very proud of, is the data table component. I originally developed this as an Aura component and have since recreated it as a Lightning Web component for your flow screens. And this gives you the ability to display, like a related list, display data in a table within a flow. And why would you want to do that? Well, the original reason I created this component was I was using what's called a record choice in a flow. And with a record choice, you have the ability, you want to present different options to the user, and you can provide different records to them, and they can then select from that. It's a built-in flow component, but the challenge with that component is with the record choices, only can display one field. And if you look at this screen, it's a little busy, but that's just one field. What I ended up doing here is I displayed a field, which is a formula field. You may have done this yourself. I said, well, I really want to see the name. I want to see the quantity. I want to see a service address. I want to see this ID. So I can concatenate it all together in a formula with putting different characters in between there. And I can create quite a mess on the screen, but I'm getting all the information that I want to have there. I really wanted to clean this up. And I said, why can't I format this and make it look like a table, make it much more readable to the user? And that's where the data table component came in. If we take a look at the differences here with a dynamic record choice versus what a data table looks like, you can see there's a big difference. This becomes much more readable to the user. In fact, they have control over this. We can set it up as multiple choices, as radio button choices, but the user can do things like they can change the width of the columns. They can turn on text wrap. They can turn that off. They can sort the columns if they want to. They can do searches and filter any number of different things. So they have that interaction with this data that you're presenting that gives them a much easier way to look at what you want to present and give them the ability to make their choices in a much easier fashion, and in a fashion that they have a little more control over than just what we see with the dynamic record choice. There's a number of other really good use cases for this. I've written a number of articles and blog posts on different use cases for the data table. There's a number of other ones as well. There's a wealth of information available online to give you ideas of how you may want to use this in your own flows and how you might be able to take advantage of this. So I recommend you take a look at that and see what you can do with this pretty powerful component. Moving on, there's another component out there called navigation button. And this is useful on flow screens where you want to be able to do more than just have your standard buttons, which are next and previous, which is you see those buttons at the bottom of the flow screen. That's all it allows you to do as a standard, but this component allows you to put your own buttons in. In this case, I have a component here. Rather than going next to previous, I wanted somebody to have the ability to either cancel what they were doing, or in this case, confirm what they wanted to do. They wanted, in this case, I'm resetting a stage. So I wanted my buttons to be there with the way I wanted them to be displayed. And I could do that by, on my flow screen, is adding this navigation button component. And in this component, I could actually have up to 3 different buttons. I can label them what they want, what I want it to be, what they do, what they look like. So I have full control as the admin creating this flow over what gets presented to the user. And in the flow itself is, after that screen, we have a decision to say, what button did they push? And based on what button they push, the flow either redirects to go one path in the flow. They selected the reset button. And there's a different path they would take if they selected the cancel button. So you have the ability in the flow to give your own buttons and then determine what you want to do based on what button the user selected. Another use case for this component is, this is a flow here to allow the user to create some settings for contact roles. So I have a toggle button, I have some checkbox buttons, and then down here I'm using the navigation button component to have the flow do different things depending upon what the user selects. So if they want to cancel, the flow goes and resets the values. If they want to save the changes, I click the save button, it saves the changes. But this third button, set contact to inactive, what that does, it makes another change, and now the same component showing the same list of buttons, it changed what's displayed on the button, what buttons get displayed, what they look like, and that's all under the control of the admin setting this up with the parameters or attributes you can define in this single component. So this goes far beyond previous and next, and really allows you to do some very interesting things with buttons in a flow. Another powerful component that you use in a flow is a lookup component. This one started on unofficial SF. Salesforce has since created a standard lookup component, but the standard component still is very limited in what its capabilities are compared to this configurable component we have here. And the primary use, or the initial use for this component, was to give you the ability to make selections on a screen and have them affect other information that you would display on that same screen. In the past, if you wanted to, say, select an account and then select a contact related to that account, you had to do it on 2 separate screens, because on the first screen where you select an account, the rest of the components on that screen didn't know what account you just selected, so you had to go to the next screen to do it. Well, this lookup component supports what I call a parent-child relationship. So a child lookup will only present the values related to what the user selected in the parent lookup. And in these examples here, we see we can have one child, we can have multiple child lookups to the same parent. If we change the parent value, we have different options made available to us in the child lookups. If we reset what's in the uh, uh, parent selection, we see different selections now available in the child lookups. And this component has been upgraded recently to now support any number of levels of generation. So you could have a parent lookup with a child lookup with a grandchild lookup, and they all can relate back to each other, and you can do all of these lookups on the same screen. So this gives you a really nice way of allowing a user to make selections and make selections dependent upon what other choices they may have previously made on that same flow screen. So now that we've seen a few of the little more complex components, I want to finish up our 10 components with another simple one. We started with a simple one that drew a line. This last component I'm going to show you today is one that displays an image, but allows that image to act like a button. So if you click on the image, you can do just like that navigation button. You can send the flow off to do any number of different things that you define it to do. In this particular example here, I had a flow that was gathering information in an opportunity to then create a merged document using Conga Composer. So rather than just having a button that said next, I wanted to add a little more visual information on that screen and actually show the Conga logo. And not only am I showing the Conga logo, this button component or this image component has the ability to display different images dependent upon what you're doing with the mouse. So if you hover over the image, you can display a different version of it. If you click on it, you can display another version of it. So you can create a very nice 3D visual effect with your buttons here by using this image component rather than a standard button. Another use that I use for the image component, in addition to just having this 3D type effect, is you can use GIF files as well. And I was having an issue with an org where we had converted them from Classic to Lightning. And if you've ever done that with a group of users before, you know that oftentimes they want to go back and still do things in Classic because that's what they're used to. Well, I was making new enhancements that would only work in Lightning. I did not want my users going back to Classic and running these flows or running these automations. So I updated those flows that if they were running in Classic, it would stop them and display an image at a certain point here. So if the user goes back to Classic, because that's what they're used to, they go into their opportunity, they click on their button that's going to run a flow. This time now it knows it's in Classic and it says, no, I don't want you to do that. You've got to go back to Lightning to do this. So just adding a little lightness here, a little humor. So the user sees that and they're just being reminded that they really need to be working in Lightning and not in Classic. So that's how, just a couple different ways you can use an image component. So all of these components, they're all available on Unofficial SF. All your instructions are there. All the source code is there if you want to see how these were created and how it was all put together. They're great add-ons to your toolkit, things that you may want to do in your flows on your Lightning record pages, just to make things more interesting and more flexible for your users. Just a bonus tip here as well is a lot of these components really took advantage of the real power and flexibility that you have with filtering by values and what's going to be visible to your users. So really take advantage of filtering so you can present the information that the user needs to see at the right time and the right place, and only at those times that you want them to be able to see it and interact with it. Much more powerful being able to do this in Lightning than being in Classic where you saw everything all the time, always, and just was scrolling up and down your pages. So I hope you got some interesting ideas from this. I'll be around during the presentation, hopefully, to answer any questions that you have, get feedback from you on how you may want to use these. Again, thank you to our sponsors today. We appreciate you allowing us to bring these presentations to you. I'm glad to be part of this, and thank you very much. I really appreciated being here, and hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.